Hello everyone, Ashkanda here, and today, in our second try of making this podcast, me and my great friend, Mary Ponomareva, will be talking about the future.
Yeah.
I think main views on how the future could be is whether we could be going into dystopian cyberpunk reality, or whether the future will be more something that you cited, more like solarpunk, which I personally didn't hear before we started working on this project, but it's more like the concept where more of a sustainable energy going to be used, more of a prosperous way for people to live in this futuristic world, where people technically would be more equal, the society will be more egalitarian, and everybody would have better chances to have a better life, while cyberpunk usually is a world dominated by huge corporations, dominated by big money, and it's something where you will not be able to kind of survive unless you'll become some kind of a cyborg, or you will try to enhance yourself, and then as in a lot of concepts like this, people becoming mercenaries or whatever, and the only way for them to survive is just doing some really risky business. So, Mary, which of those alternatives for the future you believe actually will happen?
Yeah, I think it's really hard to predict what will actually happen, and in my opinion we need both the extreme dystopias and extreme utopias, but also sort of a reach to think beyond all these binaries and think what can happen if we consider both risks and profits of new and emerging technologies, because also it's a great time to be alive, and the technologies are growing and developing at extremely accelerating rate and space, but at the same time our understanding of this technology sort of lags behind. It's way harder to comprehend and to understand, and also to predict what would be the consequences of the implementation of these technologies. Because we feel to become more divided in filter bubbles, algorithmic preemptive policing, and so on and so on.
Yeah, true. And future is not necessarily how we even being presented that, right? Because, I think in a lot of people's minds, future still feels so distant, especially when you're trying to look at this kind of sci-fi films, or the films that are speculating on the future as well, giving all this notion where people changing their limbs into some kind of a super technological prosthetics, and it gives them an enormous abilities. They become kind of a superhuman, metahuman, with those, enormous capabilities to run fast, jump super high, endure whatever human body cannot even think of enduring. And then this whole idea is kind of still being sold and massaged for us through the pop culture, but I think there are already some steps towards it, right? We see, for example, it's more of a robotics topic, but Boston Dynamics presented this beautiful
I saw this one,
robots dancing with such a sleek moves that probably some professional dancers doing similar things. Of course, maybe it was a little bit less grace, but it's unbelievable to see how something that humans just built, how the robots usually move in such a goofy way most of the times, and we would imagine robot to be such a clumsy being.
Yeah, non-superior being, indeed. And
exactly.
Now it's sort of questioned, who is more superior, and why do we even think about it that way? But indeed, it feels to me there's a growing fear among people of robotization and cyborgization, as we invented the term. And at the same time, what should you do as a human? And you're sort of witnessing this development, but at the same time, it also brings a big responsibility to sort of be aware of what's happening, to regulate it, because it can influence at a big extent how we're going to live in the future. And indeed, will we end up in dystopian or utopian scenario? And talking about the cyberpunk and the biotechnologies and human enhancements, in a way we can say that we are already cyborgs, because everybody is so connected and monitored by the technology. There's these clouds of data about us, and Also more and more companies are using some kind of devices to optimize the productivity of their workers, to keep the profits high. Like the well-known example is of course Amazon with its wristbands who track like if the employee goes to the toilet or stops to have a conversation or a small talk. And like imagine if it's like one step ahead and these technologies are becoming implemented into the body, and a pandemic-like context where the safety is also at one scale to be overweight, it creates the urgency to this sort of not really well thought out decisions to maybe be implemented and tested. And that's how also the life enhancement proposition of this deal company came to life.
True, yeah, exactly. So basically deal is
decremental,
a metaphoric name for like the conglomerate that is comprises from the biggest magnates of the world, which is fully fictional, of course, but something that would stand for decremental evolutionary
automation and lifestyle.
Automation and lifestyle, of course, which completely a gibberish, and it's more like for this beautiful acronym that will be used in order to, people will be offered a certain deal, which will be a trade-off between their enhancing their physical abilities and their physical and their mental state even, while the trade-off would be on giving up their own freedom, their own humanity, and basically they're still becoming not necessarily as slaves, but kind of a slavery of the new era would be, because they're giving up their freedom in exchange of becoming a more supreme, but basically losing all the feelings and losing all the good things that we usually value as human beings, like family, friendships, even like some little joys. They will not matter anymore for those humans who will participate in this sort of life enhancement, which is sort of also quite a big moral decision that the person accepting this deal would need to make, because they are giving up on so many things that usually a normal human being would value the most. And now, just because of the further evolution, which is more like this transhumanistic idea of the evolution where only technology would allow you to become better, they are giving up on those values that humanity was built for centuries and already.
Yeah, indeed, and also the flaws and the irrationality and the non-logic part of thinking. Considering intuition as something which is irrational and should be prohibited, eliminated, will sort of bring the employees of this deal board into this new future scenario and into this new way of living, where indeed like the senses can be just delinked from the person, from the entity, when he rents himself into this like bio-enhanced suit.
Yeah.
And also it sort of talks a lot about the responsibility of the makers and of the designers, of script writers, of people who write algorithms. And also a question, should the philosophers, the policymakers, the lawyers, or whoever, the critical thinkers, be more involved into the technological creation of this sort of Wild West developments?
Yeah, I think it's super hard to have those things intact, because it always been like this. Like all the institutionalized work and decisions should only catch up once something new is invented. Like the regulation cannot precede the invention of certain technology. It may, because I think there are some laws that regulating the space, for example, while we're still not really the space civilization yet, and even though some countries they already have some space laws. While of course, it will be super hard to like make those decisions, but of course there will be this point of the transition when the new technology will be implemented, and at a certain point it will give an advancement to the person owning it, which has been like this. That's how the economy developed for this long already, and ever since the invention of the steam engine, that's what usually been like the case, and that's how the technology we're developing. So more and more technological revolution, they're allowing the first implementers of them like to cash in the most they could, and then of course like the progress would move on, and then the regulation will catch up after this. Besides different parties who are involved, who also need to have their voices heard, otherwise the people who more marginalized will not really be listened to and will not really be taken into account by making certain decisions. We also think of it now sort of experiencing this because technology is already shaping our minds and shaping our mindsets. Like, could you believe that like 10 years ago we all be walking with all these wearables like Apple Watch or wherever it's gonna be?
Exactly.
And then now it became such a normal thing to have at your day-to-day life, or even like having a smartphone back then, it was nowhere near to what like the phones at that time were able to do. Like now, without the smartphone, person is like without their hands or something like this, because we're so much now dependent on the technology as well, that people who cannot really adopt it or be certainly tech savvy, they're already losing by a landslide to those who can be the early adopters or those who can adapt or be quite flexible in order to benefit from this. So we already kind of see this certain marginalization on a technological scale, of course, because the technologies are not yet at the point where of this huge advancement if we're talking about just the normal regular people. But yet I can already see that it will become more and more, the bigger gap will appear unless people would be more conscious about the new creations that are available on the market, and then they will need to become more of a sensitive about it. Deal is not only the thing that would allow you to live a better life, but also for your employer to exploit you as much as possible, to kind of stop you being you and you become just a machine, just a gear in this whole mechanism that needs to be rolling.
Yeah, like it is already sort of happening. There's like a cogwheel in a big system, and being swallowed by this system at some point, but that was sort of like manifesting it to the extreme. And if you talk about marginalization, indeed, like you can probably still remember the time you got your first cell phone, and from now on so many things have happened. But I think that marginalization happens not only through technological advancement, but through the visions of this technology, and how they are transferred to people's mind through popular culture. Like, for example, you have these Hollywood movies that dominates the cinema theaters everywhere in the world, and where back from the 70s you kind of had this like optimistic vision of the future where the better world is yet ahead of you, and that a lot is still to be extracted. People will be sent to space, and the technology will only bring the positive and the good for the human being and for the civilization.
I would disagree with that. I think maybe in 70s it was more true, but I think more of a sci-fi or more like cult sci-fi movies, they appeared already like in the late 70s, 80s, something like this.
That's
so it's more like the case exactly where already cyberpunk started to appear, like Philip K. Dick's based film Blade Runner. That's like one of the most beloved or famous like cyberpunk genre movies, where the world is not presented in the nice colors already.
Yeah, like that's also adds to it indeed, like also this like the opposite, the dystopia, and that it seems like the dystopia and this cyberpunk vibes are being normalized through this popular culture and the movies, and this layer of science fiction.
Yeah, but I think the part of it is also that as much as we are trying to be rational about that there should be no black or white, people shouldn't go into the extremes about certain things, but I think that what kind of excites the most usually when you'll be seeing this super colorful, beautiful neon lights, dystopian life of the cyberpunk, or you'll be seeing something like prosperous also, I don't know, life in a bubble, something that like Aldous Huxley kind of wrote about the people, Brave New World, exactly. So Aldous Huxley wrote this story about more prosperous life where people will be like, it's probably still a different topic because people were already synthesized from different ways and people were already kind of...
like separated into the groups.
Yeah, so from the day they were born, they already knew they belonged to alpha, beta, gamma, or theta, whatever groups they would be. So they were kind of born with the intention that those are alphas and they will be having these traits, these are betas, they will have these traits. So everything was already kind of predetermined for all the people. Because of us kind of going into the extremes and kind of making those polarized vision of how the future could be, that's I think what kind of excites people, and that's how people would usually want the future to be. Otherwise, what most likely to happen, and we probably understand that the future would not be too different from what we experience now, even like maybe 50 years from now, there will be no flying cars. There will be probably the same mundane life that we're living right now, but maybe we will have neuralinks implants somewhere like here on our foreheads or whatever. But the life itself, or like the world itself, probably wouldn't change that much, to be honest. And we're all afraid of like evil AI taking over or like robots dominating everyone or whatever. But I think it's just, because it's such a thrilling idea of some disaster to happen, that of course like everybody will continue speculating that in the pop culture because it's just interesting for people to think about it. But in reality, we most likely gonna just be living our mundane lives.
Like if I think about future visions and like extreme future visions, I think they sort of help us to be alarmed for the future to come and prepare to it mentally, and also sort of prepare to it in a state like what is the future we don't want to find ourselves in, and it's becoming more and more difficult in my opinion. Because a lot of future visions didn't get materialized that were sort of on the main agenda and mainstream, like a lot of space programs got closed and so on and so on. But at the same time, we still hold on into the certain ideas of the future, and maybe we need to let go of this technocentric ideas in general and think more about the humanitarian advancement and just advancements in like the way people build societies and the way people communicate, interact, and what are the values within these societies and how can we create more maybe inclusive and open societies.
True. But like what really maybe frustrates me at this point is just had this idea of like I went on a rant and probably future gonna be boring and mundane, and I kind of started to get this feeling that everybody kind of imagines future to be a certain extreme, either super prosperity or incredible catastrophe, and yet I personally think that it's gonna end up in such a disappointment that future would not be as exciting as we want it to be. Even exciting in a negative state, because it will be same good old boring gray life, and there will be no really like those spectrums. So like there is of course this huge spectrum between black and white, and we probably gonna end up somewhere in the medium. But I just realized that, would you feel disappointed if the future would not be anything that we envisioning now, or people envisioning, like other people envisioning with the pop culture, people envisioning with saying that all machines gonna dominate everywhere and everything's gonna be like that?
Right, like I think to me like these speculations about the future are speculations that people kind of imagine this the worst outcome scenarios, but they know that they will not be reached. So that's like already to me something I think about. And I think what you say, the boring future, that's like extremely difficult to speculate upon, isn't it?
Yeah, a lot of things like that were people envisioning, like even wells happening with time travels or with some alternative realities or whatever it is. While I think now we more kind of coming to the point where we realize that we as humanity either, like, we cannot potentially fly out of our galaxy, so we cannot really colonize any other planets besides the ones that are already within our reach, because it's gonna be too long for people to reach other places. So that kind of vision is already proving all the visionaries from the past wrong, because of course we didn't have the knowledge back in the times, but now everybody just realized that the fastest speed possible that we can envision is the speed of light, and with that speed we just cannot even travel to other galaxies, and people who would be on board at that time. So it could potentially be done if there will be several generations of people living on this spaceship who would be traveling to another galaxy, but only like not the person themselves, but like maybe their grandchildren would reach the other galaxy. But that's like such a long time, so there will be no human being actually being able to travel, something that a lot of films and books still kind of speculating upon. So unless we'll find some other technological ways, like the teleportation, whatever it is, some of the things that we've been kind of feed already from a long time, the future, as some of the classic sci-fi writers, it will not happen. And then talking about like utopia or dystopia, or more like cyberpunk views, this is more like something that will happen. And I think if you look at the life itself, it's kind of still mundane. It's just more the packaging which it wrapped that what excites people more. And I think a lot of people like cyberpunk just because it sounds super cool and it looks super great. And like now there was all this hype with the game that was out recently, and then people really into the aesthetics rather than looking into the actual like meanings. But probably gonna happen. What kind of is envisioned? Of course, you can make any kind of thrilling story, but just in a different settings. But at the end of the day, you just should look beyond the wrapping, because technically those are the same old stories that are being taught in just the normal settings as well. And like, I don't know, for example, Asimov, he was writing the Foundation, where he was sort of really criticizing the religion, or at least showing the advancement that like the people who invented the religion, they kind of have the full control over those who are now becoming the believers, because they can just rotate them whatever they want. And like the Foundation was this artificial planet where they just decided that the best way for them to control neighboring planets would be for them to pretend that they're some kind of prophets and they have some special powers, and they basically were sharing with them nuclear power, because all the neighboring planets, they didn't have it anymore.
Right.
And they were teaching them how to bring this power back to work, but never explaining how actually the principles of the work. So more like they were teaching them maintenance.
Right, like, but not really explaining. But not explaining
what is happening. That's why they were only believing in them being these prophets and like saint people and whatever they are. So that was kind of a funny thing. So that was more of a critique of that part. And of course, if you just pull it out of the setting of the sci-fi, you can also just tell the story of, I don't know, some cult appearing, and then some just genius or mad genius person came up with the cult, but he was super rational about what it actually is, but a lot of people started to believe in it, so boom, you kind of have it. And he just exploiting their beliefs into something else.
Yeah, but isn't it what it's also happening with technologies? Like a lot of things we don't understand, and we fully rely and trust like the makers, like Facebook, Amazon, whatsoever, Google, and they're sort of executing this magical witchcraft.
But I do think that it's becoming less and less common now, because people are more and more woke, and with all these scandals happening with exactly those technological companies, we are now more and more we are less reliant on them. And I think now what is also happens, we are not reliant, for example, on Facebook, but then some other company like Telegram come into the place saying we are the most secure, WhatsApp sucks, our Telegram, our messenger is the better, is the most secure one. So now people starting to develop that, but then we basically only believe in words maybe somebody would make a research and really find that, yeah, okay, we didn't really find any news that what he's saying is not true, so probably we for now can trust him. So that's how it technically works these days. While it's so easy to call somebody out, but it also getting harder to fact check a lot of things because there is so much things just being said, and I mean it's both hard and easy to fact check right now.
It's also becoming like part of this like reality that you cannot really escape anymore. And maybe, as you said, it results in a lot of disappointments, but still it's completely integrated into our lifestyle.
Yeah.
Like even you can say there was in the 1957 at the Disneyland somewhere in California, a house was built completely made out of plastic. It's called Monsanto House of the Future, and it was made to showcase the versatility of polymers. And that was like a dream you can visit and experience, but what it resulted in, it's like completely integrated in our lifestyle as in a form of plastic soup, plastic straw, plastic pollution.
Yeah.
So
our life is plastic right now.
All life is plastic.
Yeah.
And like if we think about the future visions or reality visions, do you think it's good for the makers, for the artists and writers to continue speculating on that, or do you feel like we've seen it all?
I think what kind of we're experiencing right now is kind of a crisis in terms of the visions, because there is so much more ability for different content to be created, and we kind of recycling same ideas, same aesthetics all over again. So what is even original means right now? Because a lot of things that some would deem original or them become and grow into a certain level of the popularity, they in effect would not be, and that by some luck or chance they actually grew to certain prominence, and not necessarily the fact that it's something so groundbreaking that it was actually something super new. So like what probably we would experience now, not necessarily people stop visualizing whatever the future could be, because this is still the most interesting topic for everyone. Everybody kind of wants to know to this or that extent what the future may be and what's waiting for us ahead. That's why people like, I don't know, go into all this witches for them to use the tarot cards to predict what the future is going to be, or astrology or whatever other things. Some things that are kind of irrational to believe, but because we not necessarily can prove they're wrong because they're working with their own rules, it's kind of hard to say, besides just calling it out and calling it as complete nonsense. So with all the future visions, it's going to be just the same. What will be working, probably we'll see more and more cyberpunk, because just cyberpunk looks cool really for now. And then, I don't know, people will be just keep on watching.
Yeah, I think there needs to happen indeed like some kind of conscious ritual of like destroying and devaluating these aesthetics, which became the cliches of communicating these like ideas of the future, while they already outlived itself and became sort of retrofuturism, and they're becoming appropriated by commercials and companies to sort of communicate their message on a subliminal level. And if there would be some kind of act happening of conscious destruction and like stepping beyond that would be really interesting. But indeed, I feel like there's difficulty because a lot of this like mainstream popular culture visions, they do not include all the people, and they mostly advocate interests for certain groups, yet presenting it as something beneficial for the marginalized group. So that's also a little bit what the Factory of Electric Dreams plays with. It's sort of making and luring people into believing that this is the concept that can really benefit them, while in the end it's not benefiting anybody at a bigger scale, not even the deal corporation.
But what do you actually think about like the social effects of that we experience right now? Like something as influential as social media these days becoming just crazy to think. Like this I don't know, recent thing that like, I don't know, you probably didn't hear it, but like it's also kind of related to the technology. So like a lot of things that were before only available for a few people or like richer people, now there is such a low border for people to enter into, for example, the trading. So what I'm trying to like bring up here is that there is this Robinhood scandal. That Robinhood, if you've heard, basically this really trading kind of platform. And so what happened recently is that like those people from Reddit who were in some kind of a thread about trading, they just decided to like making the squeeze on the market, and basically there were a lot of people like shorting the stock of the GameStop, which is like the seller of physical copies of the games. So they have like a lot of physical locations. Basically, a lot of traders were shorting them, meaning that they were selling the stocks, because obviously in the lockdown, physical locations, physical stores are not really valuable anymore. So those guys were instead started to buy the stocks, vice versa. So they upped the price to like 5 times more, 500% more in a day. And because of this, the platform basically banned from trading for a while for this particular thing.
Okay. Because of this speculating bubble. Sort of.
So just like social effects in terms of how social media can amplify anything now, we can also put there the cancel culture, the everything. So, you know, like, I think those who may feel marginalized now, just by having the platform, they are now having this kind of a tool and weapon to speak out more, but also to create sometimes some kind of a disastrous effect from something that you wouldn't expect. And sometimes it could be good, sometimes it could be for the bad. I think what a lot of people kind of leaving out still from the equation of the future is the social media, and how efficient and effective and like what effect it actually has right now on the whole world. Because even if we look at the visions that were many years ago, clearly when there was no social media, and even that are happening now, they're still kind of based on that old stuff, on the old ideas, and people are leaving this from the equation. And I know, like, of course, Black Mirror, probably the most inventive thing out of the recent series about the sci-fi, about our futures, and probably something that presents in a lot of cases what potentially may happen. They did certain things. They exploited this idea of like the social rating used by social media and all the things. So like that is thing that is still, I believe, being super undervalued, and we do feel it more and more, like the effect, the influence social media has, and even people with not a big following, they can still amplify their voices, both for the good but also for the bad. So the social media is really the blessing and the curse of like our century. And besides the technological advancement, we also should consider the social effect that are now into play.
Yeah, I agree. Like, it seems that social media has become the new public space, since you now have very limited abilities to gather together in big groups. And like there are many voices that have been heard and more present, especially like in 2020, with multiple occasions and reasons for that. And at the same point, it feels like, the only thing while it was happening is like 2020, because it was sort of like the things that were shown under the carpet, there was no place to keep them anymore, and everything sort of exploded.
At the end of the day, it's not just a public space, it's not like our public good, it's still a company working for the profit that needs our attention on this specific platform to sell us the ads, pretty much. So like social media really the biggest ad platform. It's like the meta ad space that everybody is kind of hooked up on, and now we keep on using it, and sometimes just a lot of scandalous things which are not necessarily sometimes even true being amplified and re-amplified.
Exactly, like it sort of brings us to this filter bubble reality where like indeed people become sort of synced into this bubbles of confirmation of like what they believe in, and you can say it sort of get risen with the coming of Trump into the presidency, and also I think with the lockdown with this very well-known virus, like there are a lot of conspiracy theories that circulate, the disinformation, the information wars. So again, like talking about the platform to speak up, it could be both for the good and also for the disinformation. And
exactly. Well, maybe to just wrap this all up, what would you like to say in the end, Mary? Like, is the future bright for us or not?
The future will be bright if we're all part of it, consciously thinking and regulating it in a sense, and just being aware where are we going, and not forgetting to wear shades, change the colors of the shades,
wear masks, disinfect your hands, take care of the close ones, and feel free to visit the exhibition. Exactly. I'll leave all the necessary links for you to check out the exhibition in the description. So also I would leave the links to Mary and her website and her Instagram, of course, so you can check out her other works. And thank you. It was an enjoyable talk. Thank you, Wawa.